We have discussed this a lot in class already, but just to drive home the point, remember, two separate governments tax Americans and have influence over Americans at the same time when someone is in the United States. For me, I'm a resident of Virginia. Therefore, the state government in Richmond taxes my paycheck and passes laws that influence my life. And the federal government in Washington, D.C. takes money out of my paycheck also and passes laws that influence my life. Maryland's, Delaware's, and other state government laws only affect me when I'm visiting those states. And those governments, Maryland, Delaware, do not take money directly out of my paycheck if I'm not a resident. Only the government of Virginia, since this is where I live and work, and the government in D.C. take money directly out of my paycheck. Different state governments tax their citizens different amounts. Federal government taxes are the same everywhere in the country. If someone lives in Maryland, the state government of Maryland taxes, and the federal government in Washington, D.C. taxes them and makes laws that affects their lives, taxes their paychecks. What do we mean by law? Crimes like murder and stealing, yes, breaking the law. Those are usually violations of state laws, though the federal government does have some laws under certain circumstances. We'll talk about those in just a moment, against murder and things like that. But laws are also passed by the legislative branch to let the executive branch spend taxpayer money at either the state level or in Washington, D.C. For example, which government passes laws to fund the fixing of roads and things like that? Answer, both. But it depends which one. If Potomac School Road has a pothole that needs to be fixed, it is the General Assembly in Richmond that passes a law allowing money to be spent to fix it. That is a local or a state road. If the pothole is on I-95, Interstate 95, that's a federal road. Congress in Washington, D.C. has to pass a law to approve funds for the executive branch to fix it. So we've talked a lot about this in class, but here are a few examples just to really drive home the point. So this is a website. It's a law firm, and they emphasize the same thing. In the United States, murder is generally prosecuted at the state level. For instance, in Virginia, first-degree murder, you can usually go to jail for up to 20 years. There's other exceptions and variants. I'm not a law expert, but in Virginia, you'll probably do about 20 years for first-degree murder. In New Jersey, you'll do 30 years. Different government. They passed a different law about murder. So it's different. Federal law is the same in all the country, but state laws will vary from state to state. There are some laws that the federal government passes about murder. Like, for instance, if the victim is a federal officer or like an FBI agent or a judge. So there are some laws that Congress in Washington, D.C. Passed about murder. But for the most part, though, that type of stuff, stealing, things like that, that's handled at the state government level. So what are some examples? I mean, if 17,000 bills are discussed by the United States Congress every year and 1,000 of those bills become law every year at the federal government level, if they're not talking about murder and stealing primarily, what are they passing laws about? And again, we talked about this, but just to drive home the point. This is the most recent aircraft carrier. It's the USS Gerald Ford. It was approved by Congress. The president wanted a new aircraft carrier, but the president can't spend a penny without Congress giving the president the authority to do so. This is the USS Gerald Ford. It was approved by Congress in 2008, though it actually did not go in, it only came into service in 2021. These things take a long time sometimes. But the thing is, that aircraft carrier cost $13.3 billion to build. That is an aircraft carrier that the President of the United States thought was needed. But the only way it happened is at least 218 in the House voted yes for it, and at least 51 in the Senate voted yes for it. If only 214 in the House had voted yes for it, that aircraft carrier is not getting built. If only 40 in the U.S. Senate voted for it, that aircraft carrier is not getting built, regardless of how badly the president might think it is needed. So that's a bill to a law, allowing the president to spend my taxpayer money, your parents' taxpayer money to build an aircraft carrier. President can't spend a penny of my taxpayer money without Congress authorizing it. Just to give you an idea of why this costs $13.3 billion, on that one aircraft carrier, there are 90 aircraft. I mean, this thing is a floating Air Force base up on the water. These things are huge. They have 5,000 servicemen and women that live on these things for months at a time. These things are huge. They're fighting military machines, and they come with many air destroyers and other ships around them. To give you an example of how powerful the United States is and how much money we invest in our military versus the rest of the world, there are 21 aircraft carriers in the world. England has 2 of them. China, I have to double check that. China has at least 1. We have 11. The world has 21. We have 11 of them. We spend a lot of money on our military, much more than any other country by far. But the only reason a dime is spent on anything is because Congress has voted. At least 218 in the House said yes, at least 51 said yes. That is a good use of taxpayer money. If only 215 voted yes, it's not getting built. It's not getting done. Just give you an idea, too, of what we're talking about. I mean, this is an aircraft carrier. There's 90 of these on there. There's 90 of these things on there. These things are military air corps. This is a projection of force in a case of war, or if there's any. Also, there's cameras on these things, too, sometimes. They can take photographs to see what the potential enemy might be doing. Of course, we have satellites and things like that, too, which is also funded by taxpayer money because Congress passed a law. 218 or more said yes, 51 said yes, then the president could build a satellite. But there's 90 of these things on one aircraft carrier. It's amazing. These things, we have 11 of these. Why do we have aircraft carriers? Well, if there is a problem, let's say in the Middle East, and the United States felt that we needed to be involved, if we had an airplane, a military fighter craft, take off from the United States of America, it would take hours and hours and hours to get halfway around the world. Instead, we have literally an Air Force base with 90 aircraft floating on the water. We have 11 of these things. And you'll notice that a lot of them are around China and North Korea, where there's a lot of tension, also close to Russia. A lot of them are in the Middle East. A couple of them are in the Middle East and up near Europe. So again, the United States is the most powerful military force in the world. We spend a lot of money on our military because Congress thinks that we should. And apparently the American people think that we should too, because we keep on voting the same congressmen and women in every 2 years. And the president. So the American people, based on our voting record, agree with this, at least in a majority, at least in theory. Because that's how democracy works. The government works for us. The House works for me and your parents. The Senate works for me and your parents. Here's another example of Congress spending money. So the president wanted to spend money, needed money to fix roads and highways like Interstate 95. But if there's a big pothole on I-95 and Congress, at least 218 and 51 didn't vote yes to give the president money to fix roads, that pothole is not getting fixed. The president can't spend a penny without Congress authorizing it. So Congress has authorized $68.9 billion in 2023, last year, for the federal aid highway program. It's the executive branch that enforces the law. They're the ones that are actually out there fixing the road and things like that. But the only reason that Joe Biden's executive branch, 2023, the only reason that Joe Biden and the executive branch of the federal government can fix roads is because the legislative branch, Congress, has approved it. 218 or more voted yes, 51 or more voted yes. Here's another example of the federal government spending my taxpayers' money, your parents' taxpayer money. There's a program called Head Start. The Head Start program promotes school readiness for children from birth to age 5. Um, the Head Start program was funded to serve about 833,000 children, pregnant women and pregnant people in centers, family homes, and family child care homes. And again, it's for low-income families. And Head Start spends money for a lot of different things, but one of the things that Head Start spends my taxpayer money, your taxpayer money for, is for kids from low-income families who might otherwise not have a meal in the morning. So when they go to school, when they go to a public school, kids from low-income families, whose parents just don't make a lot of money, they're going to get breakfast in the morning. It says here, Head Start programs are required to offer meals and snacks that make up 1/3 of the child's daily nutritional needs for part-day services. And again, the reason that it's 1/3, Congress passed a law saying 1/3. So Congress made the law, and the president is enforcing the law. It's someone that works for the president or in the executive branch that does the day-to-day and the paperwork and Head Start, but only because the legislative branch, Congress, has passed a law giving the executive branch the authority to spend money on this program called Head Start to help out kids from low-income families. And there's many, many, many. We could go on and on. This will be the last example I'll give. The United States has embassies in pretty much every country around the world. So we have buildings. We have an embassy in England. We have an embassy in Russia. We have an embassy in China. It's in case there's a crisis. So instead of Joe Biden just picking up the phone and calling Russia, which he might do, by the way, but we also have an embassy there and an ambassador who works for Joe Biden. And that ambassador is like right down the street from the Kremlin. So the ambassador can get in their car and have a direct face-to-face conversation with government officials in Russia if there's a crisis, or government officials in China if there's a crisis. And again, those ambassadors are appointed by the President of the United States. They work for the executive branch. But their salaries are approved by the legislative branch, by Congress. And here's another example. The embassy, this is the building that's in foreign countries that is considered American soil where ambassadors work. We're building a brand new embassy in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And again, embassies are run by the executive branch. Ambassadors are appointed by the President of the United States, the executive branch. But the President just can't go ahead and build an embassy. Only if Congress, 218 or more, 51 or more, voted yes. Embassy checks and balances. We give no power. We try not to give any power to any one person or one small group of people. We have checks and balances and separations of power. President can't spend a penny of my taxpayer dollars without Congress approving it. So we talked about this in class, but I thought this might be a good overview just to drive home a very important point.